This is your 2-minute warning. 2-minute warning. I know. Yeah. All right, this is our last chapter in this devotional book. We're in chapter 13. Chapter 13 of the devotional book, and we're going to be in Genesis chapter 40 and 41 today. Over the last 3 months, we've looked at different important characters in the book of Genesis. It's important to note that 40 of the 50 chapters of Genesis were devoted to the last 4 generations. So Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then Jacob's 12 sons. So we're going to finish up with Joseph today. Would someone like to start us off by reading Genesis chapter 40, verses 1 through 10?
Sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker committed an offense against their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his 2 officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them in custody in the house in the captain of the guard in the prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be with them, and he attended them. They continued for some time in custody, and one night they both dreamed, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, each his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were troubled, so he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with them in the custody of his master's house, "Why are your faces downcast today?" They said to him, "We have had dreams, and there is no one to interpret them." And Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me." So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, "In my dream there was a vine before me, and on the vine there were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and the clusters ripened into grapes."
All right. And then would someone like to read the rest of the chapter? So 11 through 23.
Now Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, so I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. Then Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you will put Pharaoh's cup into his hand according to your former custom
Thank you, Ed. So we're told that in the beginning of the chapter, of course, the butler and the baker are in prison. We're not really told the nature of their offenses. I kind of find it interesting. In verse 16, it's almost as if the baker, he saw that the butler had the interpretation was good for the butler. And so he kind of built up the courage and piped up, thinking, hey, maybe my dream is going to be good too, and it wasn't. So that's always been one of the more interesting chapters, I think, even as a kid when you learn that one had a great dream and one ended up getting hung for it. Okay, we'll start in the devotional book now on page 77. Dreams, those images that we see in our minds while we are asleep, have always been fascinating to mankind. Even today, with sophisticated scientific studies, we still wonder about how and why we dream. The Egyptians, like many other people in the ancient world, were interested in dreams and believed that dreams could give information and guidance to a person. It is not surprising then that Pharaoh was troubled by his dreams and sought someone to interpret them. It's interesting for us to see how God used Pharaoh's dreams to bring about his own purpose and how God worked in Joseph's life in making his dreams come true. Would someone like to read the first two paragraphs of page 78?
In the first verses of chapter 40, we get some idea of the power that Pharaoh had over the people. He was unhappy with the cupbearer and the baker, so he put them in prison. These were positions of importance because they safeguarded the food and drink of Pharaoh. There was also a risk of Pharaoh's displeasure as the two men discovered. They were not placed in the common prison, but rather the prison where the king's prisoners were confined. There was also the prison where Joseph was sent as a result of false accusations of Potiphar's wife. The cupbearer and baker were assigned to Joseph, and he attended them. Other versions translate this, waited on them, or served them. The warden treated Joseph favorably, but he was a servant for these important prisoners.
Sometime later, the cupbearer and baker both had dreams. The next day, Joseph found them to be troubled over the meaning of their dreams. Interpreting dreams was an important part of the Egyptian culture, and there were professional interpreters who could be consulted. Sitting in prison, they found no one to help them, no one, that is, except Joseph. Do not interpretations belong to God? Joseph asked them. The cupbearer and baker told their dreams to Joseph, and he explained to them the meaning of their dreams. The cupbearer's dream foretold his happy return to his former position, but the baker's dream sadly predicted his death. Both of their dreams came true. The cupbearer was restored to his position, but the baker was executed by Pharaoh. Joseph had asked the cupbearer to remember him when he once again served Pharaoh, but unfortunately he did not, and Joseph remained in prison. So looking at question 1 in the back of the chapter, what are some negative ways that Joseph could have reacted to his unfair treatment and continued hardships? Could have blamed God. Yeah.
He didn't have to interpret the dreams. That would have been cruelty to both of them for not being able to get out of prison.
Right. Yeah, he didn't have to interpret the dreams.
Hey Fisher, you talked about good news and bad news. Man, that's what he had there for the good for the butler and bad for the baker.
He had some really good and really bad news. Yep. Yeah, he didn't have to, even when he was sold into slavery by his brothers, he could have just given up and not been a productive member of society. Even at Potiphar's house, he could have been a lazy worker. He didn't have to move up the ranks. He could have slept with Potiphar's wife probably as much as he wanted to.
He could have easily stolen from him because he was, put in charge of everything. He could have snuck stuff away.
Yeah, he was very well trusted, so he could have stolen a lot of goods from Potiphar's house. So that's kind of back to what Brenda said. He could have just given up and blamed God and done his own thing.
It was a good example for us because he never turned his back on God. He stayed faithful in spite of all that adversity. So.
Right. I agree.
He didn't become the victim.
He didn't become the victim. Yeah. That's good. Anything else? Good. Would someone like to read the first few paragraphs under Joseph and Pharaoh's dreams?
2 years passed, and Joseph was still in prison. Then one day, Pharaoh had a dream. Actually, there were two dreams. They were probably what we would call bad dreams, and Pharaoh was troubled by them. He sent for all of the magicians and wise men in Egypt. These were the ones who would normally explain the meaning of dreams, but none of them could help him. The cupbearer, knowing of Pharaoh's dilemma, remembered a young man in the prison who was able to interpret his own dreams. This young man was Joseph, and Pharaoh sent for him in prison.
Standing before Pharaoh, Joseph must have surely been intimidated, but it did not prevent him from speaking. Pharaoh asked Joseph to interpret his strange dreams, and his reply was interesting. I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer. How or when Joseph had learned about interpreting dreams, we do not know. We really do not know much about Joseph's faith either, but we certainly see that he had a strong faith in what God could do. Somewhere in his earlier life, Joseph had developed this faith and relied upon this faith in God and relied upon him completely. Pharaoh described his dreams to him, and then Joseph explained the meaning of the dreams. We see in Joseph's faith in his reply to Pharaoh as he attributed his understanding of the dreams to God. In verses 25 and 28, Joseph said, God has revealed or shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. Joseph explained to Pharaoh that both of the dreams indicated that there would be 7 years of plentiful harvest followed by 7 years of famine. The land of Egypt was a dry desert region, and survival depended upon the Nile River and its seasonal flooding. Inadequate flooding of the Nile would quickly lead to famine that was devastating in such an arid region. Without the water of the Nile, it would be impossible to raise crops and sustain life. The meaning of Pharaoh's dreams and the potentially deadly consequences of 7 years of famine would have been apparent to anyone. Joseph boldly recommended that Pharaoh select a person to be in charge of collecting and storing grain to prepare for the coming famine. Pharaoh chose Joseph for this task, and he was given authority over all Egypt and answered only to Pharaoh. So for question 2, although not mentioned specifically, what are some indications in these chapters of Joseph's continued faith? He interpreted the dreams. Yeah, multiple times he says, this power is from God. God's the one able to interpret. So he wasn't really looking for any credit himself.
I think another thing was he didn't try to force any issues, like the cupbearer forgot him for 2 years, and we don't see anything about Joseph like appealing
Right.
for that or
Yeah.
trying to tell the jailer, hey, this guy was supposed to remember me. He just kind of waited until God put the situation in there, and then when he went to Pharaoh and he interpreted the dream, and he didn't say, I can help you through this. He didn't offer to be in that position.
Right.
But then Pharaoh put him in that position.
I agree. That's a good point. He had a lot of patience to just sit there in prison the next 2 years. Maybe he thought that, hey, this is my way out. The butler's going to remember me, and it never happens.
Happened 2 years later.
Well, it's a long time.
It's a long time.
It never happens until it happens.
Maybe he was thinking the whole time that God had taken care of him through the whole thing, and will take care of him.
Right. How about question number 3? Joseph was given a tremendous amount of authority by Pharaoh. I know we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but how did he use this authority, and what are some ways that he could have used it in the wrong way?
Came up with a good plan, how to keep the grain and save it for later.
Yeah,
Probably in a position, given all kinds of means, he could travel all over the country. He could have probably just took off
he could have.
and said, okay, thanks, Pharaoh. You can survive on your own, I'm leaving.
Yeah, it's said that the only person he answered to was Pharaoh. So this was a pretty high up position. I wonder if some of the people around Pharaoh who saw what was going on got a bit jealous or questioned it. I mean, I would question it. Here's a guy who was in prison for allegedly trying to sleep with his master's wife, and now he's saying that God speaks to him directly and he interprets dreams. We don't know yet if the dreams have come true, this dream has come true or not. We got to wait 14 years to figure if it comes true.
As the years gone by, though, I think people probably started to get on the bandwagon. Hey, wait a minute, we're losing food and we don't have anything going, and this Joseph guy seems to be
Yeah,
doing the right thing.
yeah, definitely throughout especially the famine, people finally realized he was right. But right when he was appointed to this position, and this was a position that Joseph, like you mentioned, he boldly told Pharaoh, hey, you need to appoint someone to oversee this. And then Pharaoh appoints Joseph. So if something like that happened today, I think a lot of people would be a little concerned about that. It probably does happen today. But.
You can tell he's a really responsible person. Took care of Potiphar's home really, really well, and took his responsibility real seriously in the prison, and all the grain sat in hand.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good word for it, responsible. He, even through all the hardships, he still went above and beyond, not for God, just for God, but for his masters too, and for Pharaoh. Any other thoughts?
You know, he could have, this time, if he held a grudge, he could have brought his brothers maybe up there and got rid of them.
Right.
I never thought about that, but that never really enters into the scriptures. But at the same time, I bet the thought could have came around to him.
Yeah. Yeah, and we see in the last few chapters that when the brothers do come up, he doesn't reveal himself immediately. And the brothers are scared. Even when they find out it's Joseph, they're scared just for that reason, that they think he's going to retaliate and take his revenge, and he doesn't.
I think that Joseph had thought God has protected him. I think he realized that God was, taking care of him. I mean, look at all the steps that he took, that God was there, and everything worked out great for him.
Yeah, I agree. He did. He had strong faith to go through all that. Okay. If someone would like to read, we're going to skip over to Genesis chapter 41, and we're going to go to chapter 41, verse 41. And if someone would like to read 41 through 57.
Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring off his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and he clothed him in garments of fine linen, put a gold chain around his neck. And he had him ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried out before him, bow the knee. So he set him over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh also said to Joseph,
Right. So just for a timeline, we're told Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh. So 13 years have passed now between Joseph being sold into slavery up until this point. And then Joseph, that was at the beginning of his reign with Pharaoh. So by the end of the famine, he's going to be 44. Would someone like to read a few paragraphs on page 80 under Joseph is placed in charge of Egypt?
Okay, how far?
Yeah, just a few paragraphs. Yeah.
His brothers had once referred to Joseph negatively as the dreamer, but as it turned out, Joseph's own dreams did come true. From betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment, Joseph became a ruler in one of the most powerful countries in the world at the time. God was truly with him. 30 years old was young for such an important position. Joseph was able to wisely carry out his task with God's help. There was no question of Joseph's authority. The signet ring, the gold chain, and the special chariot all indicated that Joseph was second only to Pharaoh. He was also given an Egyptian name and wife from a prominent family. Joseph became a part of the Egyptian culture, but he never forgot God. When his sons were born, he gave them Hebrew names. They may have had Egyptian names as well, but the Hebrew names recalled the God that Joseph served. The sons were Manasseh and Ephraim, both of whom were important later on because Jacob gave them a special blessing. They were also heads of tribes of the children of Israel.
The description of how Joseph's plan was carried out and the preparation for the years of famine is given in just a few verses. Then in verses 53 through 57, we see the end of the years of abundant harvests and the coming of the famine. No crops were harvested during this time, but the people of Egypt survived because of Joseph and his plan. If you'd like to turn with me to Daniel chapter 2, we're going to look at question 4. Daniel chapter 2, verses 27 through 28. If someone would like to read that, Daniel 2, 27 and 28.
Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, "The secret which the king has demanded, the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and the soothsayers cannot declare to the king. But there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days, your dream and the visions of your head upon your bed were these."
Okay, so how did Joseph interpret dreams? And how does that compare with the story of Daniel and the king's dream?
Daniel gave credit to God just like Joseph did, and did turn it at that time.
Yep. Daniel gave credit to God. Is there anything else?
Well, he was a very prayerful man.
I'm sorry.
Daniel was a very prayerful man,
Right.
so he was close to God.
Yeah, they were both very faithful. Okay.
They gave interpretation, even though some of them good.
Yeah.
They didn't want to tell the king his own things.
Right. Yeah, I wonder how nervous, especially going back to Joseph, how nervous Joseph was to tell the Pharaoh that there's going to be 7 really bad years and that he needs to prepare for it.
All I have to do is give the good first.
He did give the good first, yeah. Yeah, I mean, very few people would have ever gotten the chance to meet with the Pharaoh one-on-one. So to have your opportunity there and to give him some really bad news.
Well, we also know that Pharaoh executed one of the ones
Right.
that had a dream.
Yeah.
So here Joseph's going to follow an execution and
Yeah.
speak up.
You're right.
I think quite a bit of nerve.
You're right.
Pharaoh did really trust Joseph.
He did. Yeah.
It's amazing that Joseph was only 30 years old, and he was that wise, but God, helped him through everything.
Right.
I think Joseph proved his faith already. He might have been concerned, but I think he had faith in God that God was going to help him.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't really say that in Scripture, but I think he did have that faith.
Yeah. I agree. It's natural. He might have been just a little nervous. Maybe not. Maybe he wasn't nervous at all. I don't know. But overall, he did have enough faith where he didn't have a problem getting up there and talking to him. Okay. We'll go ahead and go back to the devotional book, page 81. If someone would like to read the last 3 paragraphs there under the cool down.
The story of Joseph continues to the end of Genesis. The famine that was predicted in Pharaoh's dream spread beyond Egypt to Canaan, where Joseph's family was living. Eventually, Jacob and Joseph's brothers were forced by the famine to go to Egypt to buy food. This led to the reuniting of Joseph with his brothers and his father, and the moving of the family of Jacob to Egypt. In Genesis 45:8, Joseph said to his brothers, "So then it was not you who sent me here, but God." Even through all the troubles and hardship, Joseph was able to see that it was part of God's plan. The betrayal of his brothers, Joseph's slavery and imprisonment, these were all used by God to put Joseph in the right place at the right time. At the end of Genesis 50:24-26, when Joseph was about to die, he made his family swear to bury his remains in the land that had been promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In Hebrews 11:22, we are reminded Joseph was speaking in faith of the Exodus when God would lead the Israelites. The family that began with Abraham to the promised land. The story, however, does not end there. It continues beyond the Exodus and through the Old Testament with the children of Israel to the New Testament and the coming of the Son of God to the same family as Joseph.
All right. So if you want to turn the page, the last page there, question number 5. Now that we have studied the main characters in Genesis, such as Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, how would you describe them? And you can give both the positive and the negatives on them. Faithful. It's a big one. What's that? Trusting.
But even though they agreed, a lot of times they were impatient, trying to help God out.
Yeah, I agree. They were impatient.
Abraham was known as the father of the faithful.
It-
And all those people you named, they were all his descendants.
all the
and they
lineage.
were faithful.
Yeah.
We got to mention some of the negative. I mean, the three ahead of Joseph all had deceit in their background. They found some way to have to fudge the truth to get what they wanted.
Right.
Now, a good indication, Joseph didn't show those tendencies, but still, there's some flaws in humans here.
Yeah, there were plenty of flaws, and from what we're shown in the Bible, Joseph had more patience with God's plan than the 3 before him. What else? Yeah, there should have been a basic understanding as to how important that family was. Yep.
A negative would be that some of them had favorite children, and
Yeah.
that is not good. No parent should have a favorite child.
Right. I agree. That's a big negative, showing favoritism, especially to your own family, and that led to a lot of problems.
And interestingly, they all had to leave where they were due to various circumstances. God told them, or Joseph, in the end, was sold into slavery and left. They had all these challenges. And they were away from home. And God sent them, or the family sent them away.
Yeah. They all kind of went their own way for a bit. Eventually, they all come back. They're buried together, I think is what we're told. So it's kind of a full circle moment. Then our last question. Throughout this study of Genesis, we have tried to see God's plan. What are some examples of how God worked to bring out his own purpose in the lives of the individuals that we have studied?
Well, one is the one we just studied. Look at what Joseph just said to his brothers when he saw us. That I've come to the recollection that, brothers, you didn't do this. It was God that made this happen, where I could be in the right place at the right time. Well, that's according to God's plan.
That's a good point.
Well, he spent, what was it, a couple of years in jail? Somebody remembered that he had foretold some dreams. He was good at it. So when Pharaoh was asking for help there, someone remembered that, and they brought him out of jail to do it.
Right.
Abraham was taken out to be sacrificed. And he says, sacrifice. And he says, God will provide. So he, he was willing to do it. He knew that God was going to take care of it. Then.
That's a good point, too.
Sarah, and Isaac,
Throughout all those hardships, God's plan was still going to happen. No matter how much humans messed it up, it was still going to get done. And so the sooner they had faith and they realized that, the better. Any other thoughts?
The brothers were afraid when they found out who Joseph really was. And then they were surprised, that he forgave them.
Yeah.
And helped them. They couldn't believe it. I always think about Reuben, though. He was one that didn't want to kill him. Before they sold him to the ones that were going to Egypt. But, Reuben, if some of those had had their way, they'd have killed him.
He justified it by saying we can just get rid of him. We don't have to kill him. So he was still at fault, but maybe not quite as much.
Look at God's movement in Esau and Jacob. The fact that they had to run from each other for one was afraid to be killed, only ended up having to force to come back.
Right.
That had to be God's plan for that to happen. Again, they were given through Abraham, they were given a certain land, and that land is important in the scheme of what God's plan was. So all these family members had to return back to this land that was promised. Even Jacob's sons ended up doing that.
Yeah. Good thoughts. Okay.
It just occurred to me that in the question it says, we have tried to see God's plan, and it seems like seek and you will find.
Yeah. thank you for your discussion, and we like getting out 2 minutes early, so we'll do it again.